Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Vicenza Oro September 2021. My name is Marco Carnielli. I am the director of the jury section, and on behalf of our I.G.I, I'd like to welcome you to Vicenza and thank you for being here. We are streaming, so you don't have to be in Vicenza, because those of you who couldn't get here can follow us online. This is a very special edition indeed, because we've gone through 21 months without any trade events, and to resume our work after 21 months, we needed a lot of courage. We feel the responsibility to launch an industry. You know, the trade fairs are the driving engine of the different industries. And we did a lot of planning, and we developed a strong community sense. It is often only referred to the web, but also for trade fairs, the subject of community is important. Trade fairs are not just there to make business. It is not just a way to make deals, but there's a lot of added value to it, because industry actually develops at trade fairs. There's a training activity, there's education being developed at trade fairs. And this is very much the reason why we do have trade fairs. And this is why we try and get together and develop teams with people who know how to do that. I.G. and Vicenza Oro have been working side by side with top experts, with the Loredana Prosperi team. Thanks very much to Loredana, thanks to the Italian Gemological Institute. We've also worked with Paolo Cesari and Assogemme, and Mr. Paolo Cesari is going to support us in introducing the subject matter. And we worked also with the trade categories. We have Federorafi with Claudia Piaserico, and this is another important contribution to our community. Let me close by saying that we are talking about gemology today, with the icons of this industry, with women. And I apologize for not being in line with that, but I'm replacing my colleague Michela, who unfortunately is wearing a plaster because she had an accident, so I'm replacing another lady. So the issue of gender equality is very much part and parcel of our work, because we support development goals of the United Nations, and we believe that this is one of the focal points we leverage on here, and this is why we'd like to try and stimulate the discussion also on concerning those issues. So I'm not going to introduce all the speakers. I'd like to thank VO Plus, who is our branch of communication, and giving the floor to our editor-in-chief. So I'd like to give the floor over to you, and thank you very much. Thank you, Marco. Thank you all. I've jotted down a few notes, if you don't mind. Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen, but good morning, ladies, and most especially, because this is a day devoted to women. Together with Marco, I am the only other male. I'm very pleased to be here and open this panel discussion. This is a panel with only women speakers. We believe that women are key to this industry. The sensitivity to color, the skill in choosing, the taste, are all fundamental in modern markets. And I'd like to also add the skill of women in working in teams, recognizing skills and talent and titles. We are very pleased to introduce women, professionals, talents that achieved important objectives professionally and for the companies they represent. Raffaella Ascagni, and the gemologist Buccellati, Loredana Sangiovanni, Gemology Director and Collection Coordinator of Dolce and Gabbana, Loredana Prosperi, the I.G.I, Vittoria Carandini, I.G.I expert at Damiani Group. And I would also like to thank most especially Claudia Piaserico, the president of Federorafi, the Fine Jewelers Association, who has just been appointed, and so we're very pleased to celebrate her new title. I'd like to thank also Alessia Crivelli, the president of the Mani Intelligenti Foundation, and Gaetano Cavalieri, the president of I.G.I, for sponsoring the Vicenza Street Fair, who's playing host to our meeting today. And I'm very pleased to give the floor to the key speakers of this discussion, and most specifically to Claudia. Over to you. Thank you, Paolo. First of all, good morning to you all. Good morning to the friends who are here. Good morning to Federica, to our guests. I'd like to thank Paolo most especially for inviting me to share with him the launch of this event. I accepted immediately the kind invitation, not just because I am personally and professionally proud to contribute with Assogemme at this event. We are tackling a subject which is very important to us, that is the subject of culture, something which is very dear to Federorafi. We are investing heavily at Federorafi in our program for the next 4 years. Over the past 5 years, together with the Manufacturers Association in Vicenza, we devoted to fabricating values, so people and community, laying emphasis on the social responsibility of entrepreneurs, not just for sustainability as such, but also for high and wide concept of social responsibility. Indeed, in our factories, we convey value over to the members of our community. Hence, the most important subjects of training, vocational training, and culture. Often refer to training, to the need to train people meeting the requirements of our company. But before training, we need the dissemination of culture, because in order to train somebody, we have to be sure that those people actually want to work in our industry, are fascinated by our industry, know what are the chances being offered by our industry, and wish to devote themselves to the industry. So what we have to do is changing the culture, creating new culture, acting on young people, because we have to understand this passion and generate this passion, but we can only do so if we disseminate culture about what we do. I was talking to Federica a couple of days ago, and I feel better aware of what I'm saying, because we carried out a small experiment on elementary school children, and we tried and talk about jewels to young kids. We looked at 5 formers, and we talked to them about gemstones, using obviously words that they can understand. So they study soil and subsoil, so they know about mining, where gemstones are located. And we understood there was a lot of curiosity, because we were talking about anecdotes, of course, so we had to have them on board. So they got stimulated into asking many questions, and then we started game so that they could develop the jewels for their mums, for their girlfriends. And then we took them to the Vicenza Museum of Jewellery, and we invented stories to generate interest in gemstones and the areas where they are sourced. And it was most interesting that these kids that were born in Vicenza that have a culture about jewels, well, these kids know nothing. And their families actually asked for new information, for additional information. Other classes asked to join because obviously this is what happens when they disseminate culture. So they learned that close to their homes there are things that are worth knowing. I apologize if it's taking more time than I was allotted, so I apologize for that, but I thank you very much, and I wish all the success for the proceedings. Thank you. Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you very much to Mr. Cesari. Good morning to you all. I'd like to welcome you again. And I would like to thank Azzurra Cesari and Assogemme for providing me with the opportunity to being with you here today to introduce the 4 gemology icons of the day. As we just heard, we're talking about gemology today. We are talking about the culture of gemstones, what makes a gemstone special, what entails the dissemination of culture on gemstones, and the role that gemology plays today. I'd like to introduce our 4 speakers, starting with Loredana Prosperi, who's the director of the analytical lab of the I.G.I. Loredana Sangiovanni is the director of the gem laboratory of Dolce & Gabbana. Vittoria Carandini, the jewelry specialist of Damiani, and our friend from Buccellati. Together with our friend Loredana, we talked at length before the opening of Vicenza Oro. And I'd like to start talking about gemology. What do you think that entails having specific skills about gemology? What do you think is the purpose of gemology today? What objective should it pursue? Wow, what a question. Thank you very much. What a lot of questions in this.
In my opinion, gemology has to go through the whole industry. What I mean to say is that all those who deal with jewels, especially jewels with gemstones, should have some gemological education. When I mean all of them, I mean starting from the buyers who have to choose the gemstones, thinking about the design of the jewelry. The designer must have this kind of competence. Those who manufacture the jewels should have this kind of knowledge to know the possible problems related to the use of a gem versus another one. The people setting gems also have to know gems to know how brittle they may be. And then the final person who sells the jewel, the shop owner, the shopkeeper, the shop assistant, to be able to propose this in the best way to the final consumer. And of course, we're talking of different facets of knowledge, because of course, it may be useful for a person who's setting the gem to know how brittle the gem is. The shop assistant can provide the final consumer with some advice, but of course, there's not need to talk about the brittleness of a given gemstone. So we're talking of 360-degree gemology, and each one of these individuals has to use of the gemology what they actually need.
I would like to ask a question now to the delegate from Dolce & Gabbana. I would like to hear from you what combining 2 worlds entails, i.e. fashion and jewelry. before we talked at length, and there was one element that struck me, that's something that you highlighted, i.e. the level of technical skill in the world of fashion. You are working for Dolce & Gabbana, and at a time when Dolce & Gabbana invited you to get on board and include high jewelry, something that you have started some 10 years ago with the launch of the first collection, and you were invited to work for them and a highly specialized gemologist. Dolce & Gabbana required understanding before they could develop something. So this is a sentence that you said, and that's something that struck me. To what extent that your technical skill is in the world of fashion, a world of fashion that knew very little about fine jewelry entailed, about gemology entailed?
Let me tell you about my experience. Prior to Gabbana, I have been working for 10 years with Loredana, and I've had the pleasure to be a gemologist at the Italian Gemology Institute. So my background is a geologist. I've worked in the Gemological Institute for 10 years as a technical expert. In other words, I had pupils and I taught to them, and I carried out lab investigations and analysis in a very objective way. So my experience at the Italian Gemological Institute was that of never accepting a compromise, but rather being always above the other parties. So that is my background, coming from a technical world, a one where everything is precise and very clear. And I moved on to the world of fashion with Dolce & Gabbana. In 2008, I decided to join the Maison because the designers I met were all people who wanted to know. They loved jewels, they loved gems, they loved colors. I mean, if you follow fashion, you know that we use colors a lot in the shoes, in the handbags, in everything. And they wanted to put color and beauty in jewels as well. But of course they needed to know, they needed to learn. So during the first 3 years at Dolce & Gabbana, until 2011, I worked together with them and with other highly specialized jewelry technologists, trying to find a leitmotif between fashion, gemology and jewels. So they learned a lot from us, but I have learned a lot from them. What did I actually learn? I learned flexibility. I learned to be able to debate and question or what could be the most correct. I mean, the gemology is a starting point. Everything must be clear. What we tell the final customer is what it actually is. Dolce & Gabbana wants to communicate about a jewel exactly as it is. They do not want to hide anything. So this is something that the Italian Gemological Institute has in common with Dolce & Gabbana. So that clarity, that objectivity I had as a teacher is what I find today in my company. Was this actually easy? I mean, was it easy to have a dialogue on the same field?
Ci chiedevano delle cose.
We have been asked things that we were not used to doing. I'm thinking about other examples in the field of gemology that in a way led us to put different gemstones together. I walked around in the trade fair, and we greatly appreciated the Italian jewelry industry, and we draw inspiration from what you do. So we are like kids in this area, enjoying this world and admiring the skills of others. So as a gemologist, for example, the fact of having two red stones together was not the right approach. So we have to be flexible, and flexibility is what helped me most. It took me some time, but I finally understood that the two things could go together and that the two worlds could support one another. Thank you, Loredana. I would like to give the floor to Raffaella Ascagni from Buccellati. Now, with reference to completely different company, a company who is 100 years old, company which is most famous, of course, in Italy and away from Italy, actually worldwide. What I'd like to learn from you is what type of relationship is established between the creative director and the gemologist. How is the team established? How can you have a functional relationship so as to get to those masterpieces that you can make? I have been working at Buccellati for over 20 years together with Mr. Buccellati, Andrea, who is the creative director. Over the years, we obviously developed a mutual friendship and trust, and that obviously provides for best cooperation. We understand our mutual tastes when it comes to gemstones, so oftentimes just few words are enough to understand how I can support his creativity, I myself, as a gemologist, so as to get to the top of what he wanted to express with his, again, creativity. I think it is incredible and fascinating when Mr. Andrea develops his drawings, his designs, and to see things that I would just consider as something beautiful becomes part of a design, and this is most gratifying and rewarding. We talked at length before getting to know each other here, and there was something else that really struck me. You said that you had shown a gemstone, and Andrea Buccellati translated this gemstone into an object. Yes, when he looks at the gemstone, he can see what that can be translated into. So I provide some kind of technical knowledge, and he can see the final object. So I could show him a pearl, and then he sees a panda or an animal or a rabbit. So I could see just a pearl, but he can see the jewel that can be made with that pearl. So, and it is really a beautiful match because you match your different knowledges and know-how. Now, let's move on to Vittoria Carandini, Damiani. Damiani is the world of timeless diamonds, white diamonds, eternal diamonds, jewelry that actually are by definition timeless. And I wanted to ask you how you can combine this spirit of timelessly or eternity with the rapid changing world, with a public who are ever more demanding and ever changing. Well, as you said, Damiani is, for its very nature, a brand which is timeless, eternal. So I'm not so keen about talking about trends. I would talk about evolution rather. Over some 100 years of history, and in 2024 we're going to celebrate our 100th anniversary. Of course, a brand evolves following the taste of the public and following the changes worldwide at a time of great uncertainty as the one that we've been experiencing over the past nearly 2 years. Having strong points of reference is something very important. jewels, are there to be passed on from generation to generation, and this very timeless nature is in great demand. So if we look at the world of jewelry today, one of the greatest trends that we are confronted with, that we are experienced, is again the idea of family heirloom. So the idea of a jewel being timeless is something that is very much in demand. Indeed, a jewel is something that has to be passed on from generation to generation. Damiani is very much a family, and this, again, the thing about passing jewels from generation to generation is key. Damiani is well known for white diamonds, but we also have a great expertise in colored gemstones and colored diamonds. And the idea of being timeless becomes even more evident because our jewels, again, bear the Damiani brand. And this hasn't got to do so much with brand, but there's the idea of the Damiani family signing a piece of jewelry which is there to remain forever. Now, on to Loredana Prosperi again. We have two Loredanas today. We're not talking about gemstones from the technical perspective. We'd like to tell the story of gemstones looking at the feature of history, of passion. Why is it so important today to create and disseminate the culture of gemstones? Yesterday, we talked about the potential democratization of gemstones, of that culture. How we can disseminate more culture? Why is it so important to create gemstones? Well, so much has already been said, and I think that we should start from a gemstone and then develop a piece of jewelry. That piece of jewelry has to be sold, otherwise everything stops. And you have to fascinate the person who's buying a jewel, who's making a purchase. Sometimes the design is being bought, sometimes the red and white gemstone is being bought. So you have to tell the story of that gemstone. I'd like to quote a straightforward example. We're not talking about now important gemstones. Let's talk about an agate, which is a cryptocrystalline quartz with the density of 264. And a refraction index of 1.4. This is gemology. This is technical gemology. But if you have to communicate about an agate, then you talk also the story of the name. So you tell, for example, that Agates is the origin, and that was a river in Sicily. That was the old name of that river, which is now called Berillo. Why is that? Because pieces of that gemstones could be found in that river. So you are telling a story. You're telling the fact that that material was known at the time of the ancient Greeks, of the Roman times, that it was used to work mirrors, to have seals. So you tell the story about a gemstone, and that triggers the fascinator. Now you can say that it comes from Brazil. So you have to get to know the story, so to share that story to the final consumer, so that final consumers understand about the nature of material which might not be that precious. But there are some materials that maybe are bought in large quantities. But that story make even a non-precious gemstones unique and precious, because it is perfect suited for that ring and for the person who's going to be given that ring. And that, I believe, is very rewarding. This is what culture entails, not just providing technical details, but the story behind an object.
come tributo a Venezia ne è l'esempio. Diciamo gli step più salienti.
Can you talk about how a high jewelry collection is born in the case of Dolce and Gabbana? How do you choose gemstones? What is the value of cuts? Can you talk to us about the pipeline? Can you focus on the different steps, how gemstones are chosen, the role of color, the role of cut? What is the specific role that a gemstone may play in the development of a collection? I'd like to answer this question, but I'd like to go back to what was said earlier on. When I decided changing jobs, I didn't know what I was doing, but then I discovered that gemology enables you to work with different people in different capacities. First of all, we train our people, so if I hadn't had an important, a sound knowledge about gemology, I wouldn't know how to start my job as a trainer. And as Loredana was rightly saying, the final customer, and I'm dealing with clients that buy single pieces, unique pieces, but even regular customer need feeling confident in what they're buying, trusting what they're buying. Oftentimes, I visit stores and shops, and I'm faced with people who do not know how to describe the product they're selling. And the fact of having some kind of knowledge enables us to pass that knowledge over, in that not only do we want to sell something, not just because the designers liked it, but you have to say to the buyer, I am happy to sell you this because this jewel represents something and includes a gemstone that I can tell to you about. But let's go back to how jewels are developed. Well, everything is born for the love for beauty, for instinct and passion. So the fashion designers fall in love and fall out of love with many different things. And the same is true for jewels. We don't follow the usual timeline of jewelers. We work in a very fast world, and that pace is actually set by the passion. For example, you referred to Venice. Well, Dolce went to Venice by himself because he likes traveling by himself. He got in touch with craftsmen, local craftsmen, and he learned. He filled his heart with the craftsmanship of small mosaic on murrinas, and he developed jewels where not only gemstones and gold is included, but also the fine techniques that have been used in Venice for centuries. This is how certain jewels were developed, the jewels that were presented in Venice. I'm referring to single pieces. This is the story, for example, behind single pieces. Single pieces oftentimes are a tribute to the city where a certain event is about to be held. So in the past, for example, we chose Agrigento as the venue for a certain event. And the fashion designers wanted to pay tribute to that city and to tell a story concerning Sicily and the city of Agrigento. This is how the single pieces are conceived. For the fine jewelry and for the watches they find in the stores, the story is different. Because the fashion designers usually come up with drawings, with ideas, which is closely connected to the fashion world, to the shoes, to the accessories. Always bearing in mind the basic idea of tradition, because the fact of vintage, the fact of being handmade, including the know-how of fine jewelry, which at times risk getting lost because no young people want to do that job. So what the fashion designers love is to renovate, keeping alive the old traditions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that you really told us a story about passion. Well, we talked about that over the phone, and that passion actually was evident. Now on to Raffaella Ascagni, Buccellati. In the case of Buccellati, we know that Buccellati really accounts for Italian style and has been doing so for over a century. And I would like to ask you, what should never be lost of sight when a high jewelry collection is developed? Your identity at Buccellati is very strong, and I wanted to ask you, how can you have in mind a clear objective to reach, never leaving the main road, as it were? Well, the Buccellati collections, in terms of inspiration, always drew from the Italian Renaissance art and nature. And that enables us to have a strong identity products. Buccellati jewels follow a certain style that include creativity and skilled masters, jewelers certainly have unique knowledge, and gemstones play an important role. I'm thinking, for example, of the cocktail rings collection. In that case, we fell in love with pastel color tourmalines. We started working at that, and at the end, we came up with a collection including over 100 pieces that turned out to be very successful, also thanks to the cooperation with the Italian Gemological Institute. Indeed, we provided a certification, individual certification, telling the story of each individual gemstones. So there was a catalog, and we included technical information together with the story of the gemstone, with some legend accompanying the products. And that obviously has been enriching the collection importantly, and that was something very, very important to us. Vittoria. Damiani obviously represents a world of white diamonds, but obviously also colored diamonds and fancy diamonds play an important role. What guides you in making purchases when it comes to gemstones? I know that Mr. Damiani travels extensively and has been doing so since he was a kid. So traveling plays an important role at Damiani. So there's a lot of research there behind the development of a collection, of a high jewelry collection.
Training.
Well, it runs in the family, you know, because Mr. Damiani, who's our creative director, selects personally unique, exclusive, special gemstones coming from all over the world, supported by our team of gemologists who are really very, very good. So, Mr. Damiani is supported by his expertise that he has learned through the years. It is a family gift, because already his father used to buy gemstones all over the world, his grandfather as well. So this is something which is passed down from generation to generation. I like to express this concept that pertains also to the actual purchase of gemstones. Everything starts from the gemstones, and then something beautiful is created following the Damiani aesthetic code, and this becomes something eternal, beautiful, and special, which is a weight of emotions and feelings when you buy a gemstone. What makes a gemstone attractive, especially if it is particularly expensive? It's a question I would like to ask Loredana too afterwards. Well, Mr. Damiani is certainly stricken first by the aesthetics of the gem and by the emotions that a gemstone can elicit. Loredana Prosperi can probably confirm this. Sometimes it is as if gems are talking to you. They're telling you something. Or even they say something about you. So that's the number one driver. And when I see Giorgio working, I realize the emotions he's feeling when he sees a beautiful gemstone, a wonderful diamond, an unbelievable ruby. So emotions and aesthetics are for sure the number one drive when choosing gemstones. Loredana. Well, I cannot but confirm all this. I mean, when you buy a gemstone or a piece of jewelry, it's not something that you actually need. It's not a primary need. It's not essential for your survival. But it is a need because you feel emotions and you want to satisfy these emotions. So these stones, because that's what they are, that are turned into gems when they're cut, they must say something. They must transfer something. They must elicit emotions. Otherwise, our job would be so dull. Conversely, I've been working for so many years, day after day, with gemstones. Also, when I analyze them in the lab, and whenever we see an inclusion, a tree face in an emerald, a Rutilius needle, we fall in love with that gemstone. You know, when you see something beautiful, you fall in love with it. Beautiful means that the gemstone transfers emotions, elicits emotions. You're right, we always talk about gemstones and imperfections, but from what you told us, imperfections are very important because they make gemstones unique. Exactly, imperfections make gemstones unique. Sometimes I give some examples. I mean, some of you probably know Mina, the singer, and she had a nevus right there. That's an imperfection, but that makes Mina unique, and this happens to gemstones as well. There are diamonds that are classified PK1 because you can see with your naked eye the inclusion. It might be a red or a green inclusion, and they make that gemstone unique. And many people have understood that. And some really look for gemstones with inclusions. There's a wholesaler who found diamonds cut in a specific way, and these multiform inclusions looked like a heart or a star. Okay, it's a PK1 or PK2, but it is a unique gemstone. Where do you find another one like that? And that elicits emotions. And in these cases, the price is advantageous, exactly because it costs less, and therefore more people can afford it. Loredana, at Dolce & Gabbana, how do you view the imperfections of gemstones? Well, it depends. Do you understand its value? Well, compared to Buccellati and Damiani, we are still babies in this industry, and we still have to admire and to be inspired. Our company has asked from the very beginning to find gemstones of top quality in terms of cut, color, clarity, because we wanted to be credible on the market, and we had to work hard for our credibility. So that was the first drive. Let's start with materials that are perfect, that cannot be criticized. Of course, with time, this concept has evolved, and we have made use of gemstones, which we do not like to refer to as semi-precious. We do not like to discriminate between precious and semi-precious. But we have started using gemstones that could be more easily found on the market. You know, when a gemstone is less expensive. This is due to the fact that you can more easily find it on the market. So we decided to mix gemstones that were perfect from a quality viewpoint with gemstones that were easier to find and less expensive, maybe less beautiful. And we have also moved towards particular cuts. So making use of gemstones that could be more easily found on the market, such as amethysts, which are beautiful gemstones. In the past, amethysts were really greatly appreciated also by the noble families, and it has a color which is unique. So we've made some beautiful jewels with amethysts, opting for a very special shape. I mean, some love long teardrops, other like fat teardrops, you know. The teardrop is not always identical. I mean, coming from the world of fashion, for us, a dress can